Today we are going to finish the driver's side exhaust manifold off, do the crossover pipe into the turbo feed, and then we're going to finalise the clutch layout with George from Clutch Industries. Then if we've still got a bit of time, we'll try and put the engine and the box back in the cut and try and mock up the dump pipe. Then that'll be it. Let's roll.
Last episode, we got the passenger side exhaust manifold fabricated and turbo mounted. Today, we have to finish the driver's side and then join them together using a crossover pipe with flanges. The manifold is welded onto a piece of square steel to prevent the heat from warping it. Once it's welded up, the tacks can be ground off and then the flange machined flat. With that done, it's time to make the crossover pipe that runs around the front of the engine, joining the two banks of the turbo exhaust housing. A flex joint in the crossover pipe will help prevent cracking when the pipe heats and cools.
At the moment, I'm just pulling the exhaust manifold off. The reason we're doing that is so I can take it back with us, and I'm going to get it all coated so it doesn't rust up and look all yuck. Going to do the same thing with the turbo, and basically that'll be it. So the engine will basically just get put away as it is, cover it over, and we'll pull the crossmember out, so while we're gone, we can actually get that modified. Then when we're back again with my car, we can start putting it back together straight away rather than welding subframe, reassembling engine, doing all that sort of stuff. So hopefully next time we're here, it'll just be like whack it together, bang it in, off we go.
It's extended tip, so it's 86mm on the tip.
Cool. That's a monster wheel, bro. Yeah.
I'll give you an extended tip.
That's what she said. That's awesome.
86.5.
Love billet wheels, man. So why do they do an extended tip, Al?
Because it can give you more
Basically
area.
get more wheel size
Just stealing a
without
bit
having-
more area, yeah.
Yeah, cool. So it's effectively like running a 2mm bigger diameter wheel in the same back plate without having to machine the cover
Yeah,
out.
that's it.
It's time to look at clutches, and Al's mate George has come along to give us a hand.
So I'd been talking to Al about this project, sounded pretty exciting, you know, I love something difficult and different. Obviously, many of us car enthusiasts, we all get a bit nervous about sandwich plate adapters and adapting a different clutch or gearbox to an engine. So in the past, you know, in the old days, a lot of people used to put V8s in Land Cruisers and things like that. And so we make off-the-shelf kits that you can bolt in and makes it quite simple. With more modern cars, it is far more difficult. There's many more factors at play. And so you've really got to, I mean, you start by obviously figuring out how you're going to mate this gearbox to an engine. So normally you start with an adapter plate, or you're changing a bell housing to make it mate up. After that, then we've got to look at the actual stack height of the engine. So we've got to figure out where everything is sitting and where the clutch is going to sit within the bell housing, so that we know where it sits in relation to the fork. Because then we've got to figure out where this fork throws and make sure that we will get release on the diaphragm and your clutch will work. But one of the hardest things when you're chasing big power, obviously, is you want a clutch that's drivable. Whether it's going to be a street car and a track car, you've got to look at what your use is going to be for this vehicle and make sure you're picking the right friction materials to suit your application. So normally for a daily driven car, you'd be looking for an organic clutch because it wears well, it's not harsh on the components, and it's nice to drive. So day to day, it's sensational to use. The compromise of going with an organic clutch is then if you're going out and doing high performance sort of things, or your car's turbocharged and putting out much more power than the factory setup, obviously this friction material is going to have trouble gripping. So that's when we look to more harsh friction material such as ceramic, which gives you far more grip as such in your clutch. But the compromise is that it does wear on components. So it's always this sliding scale of where do you want to sit with your clutch, what do you want to do with it, because at one end of the spectrum it's great to use on a track, won't be nice on the street, and vice versa. We're looking at putting a twin plate in it because it's a V8 for starters. Obviously it's got plenty of torque, and then we're going to hang a turbo off the side, so obviously we're multiplying this torque plenty. So we need something that's going to handle the grunt, but at the same time it's going to be a daily car. It's going to be used day to day, and it's going to be driven in Sydney traffic. So we need something that's drivable and functional. I would prefer to stick with an organic clutch in something like this because on the street it's going to be nice to drive. As soon as we go to a ceramic, it becomes more sudden engagement, and that's when you sort of feel like the pedal's taking away from you when you're driving. So the reason you'd select a twin plate over a single plate clutch, obviously you're spreading the load. It just makes it easier for the clutch to do what it needs to do. So instead of working on a clutch that's 9 inches in diameter and you've got one set of friction plate to work off, now you've got two. So you've balanced that load out between the two, which means it can have far greater capacity while still being a small diameter clutch. Where we're at with this current project is we've got the adapter plate figured out, and we can make the engine and gearbox, and the spigot is nice and centered, the input shaft is sliding perfectly into that. So now we need to look at the actual clutch itself and what stack height we've got off this adapter plate. So in this case, we've done something a bit different. We've used a solid flywheel conversion out of a different vehicle, and we've been able to adapt this to this application. The advantage of using this was it gave us the spacing we needed that matched up with that sandwich plate adapter. So hopefully we still will be working with what would be almost a standard RV clutch. That's the intention behind it, but obviously we've got to take all the measurements and make sure that everything is 100% in order. So what we'll look at once we get it all together, we'll cut an inspection hole in the gearbox, and that way we can see everything inside the bell housing and know exactly where things are sitting. And we need to look at where that fork is sitting at rest and also at full throw so that we know exactly what heights the clutch is operating at. From there, we can go back and look at how to develop a clutch that is the correct stack height to work in this application, and then it's a matter of popping it in and away we go. So we'll start with the most basic and the day-to-day sort of driver one. More suitable for your traffic driving and so on, we're using the organic clutch plate. I talked about organic before. This is what is an organic clutch plate. Most of us are familiar with that. That's your normal day-to-day driving sort of clutch plate that you'd have in any passenger car. So in this case, it's a twin plate. So that's the top plate. And then we've got the next intermediary plate. That stacks up there. And then our final plate underneath. You'll also notice we have anti-chatter springs here, and that means that your twin plate doesn't rattle on idle when your foot's on the clutch, which is quite unique on a twin plate. So we'll put him back together, and that would be most likely what we're going to use in this application because we do want it to be a street car and we want it drivable and we want to be able to enjoy the car, so that'll allow us to do so. If we were going for something a bit more serious, something that's going to handle a bit more power and more so handle more abuse and aggressive driving, we'd move over to something like a cerometallic. So in this case, we've got a sprung hub cerometallic, and this is what's called a cushion button ceramic clutch plate. So it's called button because of the ceramic buttons, and cushion because there's a level of cushion between each side of the friction plate. Basically, we've also got a sprung hub, and that allows for some dampening and makes it far more nicer to drive day to day. As soon as you get rid of this dampening, the clutch becomes more sudden. Obviously, as it becomes more sudden, it's harder to drive. So once again, we are looking at a twin plate here. We've got our intermediary plate and the second one underneath. You'll also notice concentric slave cylinders with all of these. These ones are to suit LS, but we try to use concentric slave cylinders in other applications as well because they are consistent. In this case, however, we will probably maintain the RB30 style clutch fork that we've got in here, the RB26, more so because it makes it more simple, and we already have a Mantic kit that's a non-direct fit kit that'll bolt straight onto an RB30 with some small modifications to your flywheel. So the last one we have here is called a solid center clutch. This is by far the most sudden engagement, but it also will hold the most abuse and handle the most abuse. So no matter what you're going to throw at it, these things will handle it. So we have these in quite a few drag cars and things like that, but also circuit racing cars. Basically, we've simplified the process, we've got rid of the springs, and we've just got a solid hub that means that you're applying that drive straight to the driveline. So I would use this application in a far more high-powered car and something that's going to be abused every day, because if you try to drive that on the street, you can, but it's not as pleasant as an organic or even a cushion button ceramic.
So, crazy race car, somewhere in between, still a bit of a pig to drive, daily.
Yep.
But still lots of power through all of them.
That's right, yep.
Got
so
it.
we're still holding 1,000 newton meters on the organic plates here, which is massive power for a twin plate clutch. And the beauty is that these are drivable, so you've got smooth engagement and a soft pedal.
Let's put it in.
Let's do
No,
it.
actually, maybe we should measure it first.
We have a bit of measuring yet to go, so we've got to make sure we have all the right bits to do that and make sure that everything's in line, and then from there, it's a simple process.
With the scrap gearbox having served its purpose for mock-up, it can be sent to Skyline box heaven, and a spare rear-wheel drive box bolted on to check for slave cylinder clearance.
The beauty is what our whole goal was, to make that sandwich plate adapter the right height to match what we did inside to step the cover out and the whole clutch out. So really, everything's perfectly in line, which is what we wanted.
What's that?
This is a new slave cylinder, so we can make sure that it's throwing as we want it to throw. You know how I was talking about, we need to check that it sits at the right spot at rest, and at full throw it's going to have disengagement. So that's what we're going to look at now.
The half cut has also now served its purpose and will be sent away for scrap, while turbo parts are being sent off for coating. Next time on the Double Unicorn build, Benny's RB25 develops a bad sound that means it's now make or break with his V8 conversion. We take all the parts mocked up in the front cut and attempt to jam them into his Stagea.